All right, welcome back to the broadcast. 7:30 is the time. It's the Dan Fagan Show. We're statewide on Fox 4, KTBY, also in high definition on channel 654, and we're streaming globally on the Dan Fagan Show Facebook page. Happy to welcome here in the studio the governor of our state, Governor Sean Parnell. How are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you. Good morning.
Well, it's good morning to you. It's good to see you. We appreciate you getting up, and I know you're a busy man, and we appreciate you coming in.
There's nowhere I'd rather be at 7:30.
And spending time with us.
Yeah.
We had an opportunity yesterday to meet the Sacketts from Idaho. I know you were at a luncheon yesterday that they spoke at, which you spoke at too, I understand. And for folks who didn't see the show yesterday, who didn't hear about them, these are a couple that bought a piece of property in Idaho.
$23,000.
Yeah,
a lot.
Not a major expense. They wanted to develop it. Oh, do you want to? All right, let's go to a break. We'll go to a break. No, we're good? Okay. Sorry about that. They basically wanted to just have a home there, you know.
Build a home on it.
Yeah. American dream, right? They started doing work on it, and an EPA official comes by, says it's a wetland, you can't do that. Turns out the 4 criteria that would determine whether it's a wetland, it didn't meet any of those, wasn't even on the wetland registry. Long story short, they ended up going before the Supreme Court. At the time that they went to the Supreme Court, they owed the government $110 million in fines.
Well, the EPA was charging them $75,000 a day.
A day, yeah.
If they didn't remove the fill and put their original dirt back on.
Yes.
So.
A very compelling story. The Supreme Court, even the liberal judges, voted or ruled against the EPA, 9-0.
Well, what the EPA had really done was said, we're going to make you remove this fill or pay the fine, and by the way, you don't get any review of our decision.
Yes.
When the Sacketts had their environmental engineer expert telling them these were not wetlands, they're not subject to their jurisdiction.
Right.
And they weren't even willing to listen to that argument. And that's what the Supreme Court kicked them out on. It was, you violated the Sacketts' right to due process by not giving them the chance to appeal this decision or review the decision.
And I know you have done battle with the federal government on behalf of the state.
Well, in fact, we joined the Sacketts at the Supreme Court level.
You were the first one, too.
Our state was the first to join them. There were about 8 states that followed.
Right.
I heard about their case, and immediately we contacted the Sacketts, said we're going to join you in this because it affects private property in Alaska too. If the EPA can do this in Idaho, they can do this to private property owners in Alaska,
right?
And any other state, and that's what some of our other resource state governors saw as well. And we were right. I mean, like you said, the Supreme Court ruled 9-0.
Right.
All those justices said, EPA, you overreached.
Yes.
What is the advantage of the state of Alaska joining them in this case and other states?
Well, it adds strength, it adds weight to the case because the precedent being set by the EPA in one state gets carried over into other states. We have similar issues in Hoonah, in Haines, in Anchorage. In fact, the consultant who also spoke yesterday, the Sacketts wetlands expert who used to work for the Corps of Engineers, used to do these 404 permits, he was telling us about cases that he knows of in Anchorage and Haines as well, where this is happening. So the real benefit is we have to set the precedent that the EPA cannot arbitrarily and capriciously take your property without any kind of review.
A couple of thoughts on this subject. One, and I hate to get mired in the mud here, but I was frankly, and it's hard for me to get shocked by anything I read in the Daily News anymore. I was frankly shocked at the paper's coverage. They almost completely ignored the Sackett story.
They did.
Your thought on
well, how they twisted this into a Pebble Mine story is beyond me. I mean, the story even started before the Sacketts in Idaho, where the EPA went after one of their neighbors in a criminal case.
Yes.
Where the jury, well, backing up from there, the EPA went onto their property.
Yes.
Had a search warrant, and their search warrant was to search for wetlands.
Yes.
Claimed they found wetlands and charged this other couple with a criminal environmental complaint. They went to court subject to criminal penalties. The jury acquitted them, but the jury, as they're about to announce their verdict, the federal marshals were in the courtroom with leg irons and handcuffs, we were told yesterday at the luncheon. And this is a 65-year-old retiree and his wife who just wanted to build on their property too. And You know, there's a real compelling story there to be told of federal overreach, but instead the Daily News story today gets twisted around about somehow this is related to, you know, the Pebble mine, and it's not, you know, except that perhaps the EPA is now overstepping its bounds once again and stepping into something it shouldn't yet, you know. But these are totally different issues.
Why is it that we have a paper in the largest city in the state that is so ideologically different than the majority opinion in the state? Because clearly, you know, the agenda they push is not the agenda most Alaskans favor. How is it that we've gotten to this place?
Dan, I'm not going to go to that place with you because
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's
Yeah.
speculating about others' motivations, and I mean, I can just tell you that there is so much in the Sackett story that was missed today, and I'd like Alaskans to know the story. I had a couple property owners come up to me afterwards who, like the Sacketts, own property near an Alaska lake and a recreational property that they want to develop, and they said that they were better informed now about what can be done and can't be done by the federal government, and that's the kind of information the public needs.
Back to the EPA, what can you as governor do? Because we spoke to the fellow who helped the Sacketts, who Pacific Liberty...
Pacific Legal Foundation.
That's right,
Yeah.
and he said really this lies with Congress. They have to be the aggressor here in keeping EPA...
Well, this is exactly why the EPA and the other regulatory agencies are so strong, and it's because Congress is so impotent.
Yes.
You know, I mean, they are the deadlock, the gridlock, their inability to legislate or regulate the regulators enables and furthers the agency's ability to push the bounds. And really, Congress is our only check on, and the court system, those are our checks on regulatory powers. But Congress is unable at this point to do that because of the gridlock there.
What can a state do so they don't overreach and overstep their boundaries?
Well, and that's where we have stepped in. We look for judicial review. We look to the court system to guarantee our citizens' rights. And we do that whether it's our own citizen or another state. There's a Nevada case that involves, that we stepped into where the federal agency was trying to redefine a mill site, which effectively would shrink the ability of the mine to operate a lot. And we have over 1,000 federal mining claims on our lands. And if that definition were to take hold, our federal mining claims would be valueless. And so we stepped into that case as well because it had Alaska implications. And we're doing that all across the nation. Whenever we see something that impacts Alaskans, we step in elsewhere too.
Let's talk about the tax regime that you're concerned about. I know you've been very public about this. There are some in the Senate who don't share your view. Give us a scenario. Where will we be 10 years from now if the current tax regime is still in place?
Well, especially if taxes are high, because
oil prices are high. You mean?
I'm sorry, oil prices
Yeah.
are high. Bottom line is production is declining, and in this higher price environment, especially when we were just in this $120, $130 barrel price environment, we've seen the investment money go to North Dakota, Texas, and places beyond. The money here really has been in maintaining kind of the harvest. And what that means is that in existing fields like Prudhoe and Kuparuk, there is a lot of oil that is going untapped and undeveloped, which means that Alaska's wealth is remaining underground. It means that we don't have access to that. People have this notion that 100% of the oil in the ground will get developed, so it doesn't matter, it's going to get developed anyway. That's not true. 20% might come out of the ground of a particular field, and in this case, heavy oil and viscous oil could very well lie there for years while investment chases greater return elsewhere. And so ACEs at these higher prices is not competitive. Now, I'll grant that the information we had 5 years ago and the information today is that at $60 a barrel, ACEs is competitive.
Yeah.
But when it comes to this $80, $100, $120 barrel oil, we're not competitive. And the legislature's consultants agreed. It wasn't the governor's administration saying it. It was the legislature's consultants, and they put the graphs up on the PowerPoint of our competitiveness versus other jurisdictions. But there really is a notion in the Senate, and it's a 10-10 split, 10 Democrats, 10 Republicans. There's a notion in the Senate, much like has taken hold in the federal government, and that is that it's kind of dead-end economics that says if you tax more, you get more. And I think if you tax less, we'll actually grow our economy because more investment will follow. And that's the underlying debate. You see it when you see Senator Wielechowski or Senator French asking about, well, do you have information on a company's internal rate of return? You know, if you think about that, if you have the government asking what's your profit in a business, that means that with everybody that pays, every small business here that pays a corporate income tax, the government can get in your books and say, how much you making? You know, we think you're making too much, so we're going to take a little more.
Yeah.
That's just, to me, that does not grow an economy. Instead, that disincentivizes, or, you know, investment. Our daughter, when she was 12, I think she asked mom and dad, you know, for her first iPod. And I said, honey, you know, if you're willing to work and earn money to pay half of that, we'll pay the other half. It's kind of that profit motive.
Yeah.
You know, if you work. So she babysat, she shoveled snow off of decks and sidewalks, earned that half, and Sandy and I pitched in the other half on her first iPod. Well, the same notion plays out in business, that if you have some profit that you can achieve and move forward to, you're going to grow a business, you're going to create more jobs for Alaskans, and that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to cap opportunity in this state. We want unlimited opportunity.
How do we really ever know, though, that spot where we're competitive? I know we get consultants. I know we can look around. We can look at other regions that have oil and gas, and that all seems to indicate that our taxes are too high. But how do we really ever know for sure? Or can we?
Well, I think you look for growth in existing fields, not just new fields. And that's the other part of the debate, is that we have existing fields with oil that's not being produced, they're not even trying for because it's too costly to get. And we have new fields where nobody's ever really explored and developed before. We need tax changes to incentivize both situations. When the Senate kind of threw up their hands in the end and passed, you know, a tax change just for new fields, they weren't helping any kind of production today or in the near term. When we know that oil's there. How will we know we're in the sweet spot? We'll know it when we see more growth and more oil. You know, the goal is really 1 million barrels a day.
Yeah.
And so I've set the goal. We can achieve it, but it's going to take a turnaround.
How do we know for sure if we lower taxes, these companies are going to put their investment dollars back in Alaska?
Well, I know for sure that if we continue the current course, we're going to continue production decline at 6% to 9% a year from 600,000 barrels a day. I know that for sure, because that's what's happening.
That's the only guarantee.
That's the guarantee.
Given.
Yeah, we've got a guaranteed decline right now.
Yeah.
I would rather move forward with a new way of viewing this, that lower taxes drives business decisions and drives more money here.
It seems to me, Governor, this is a vision issue. I think some who favor the status quo or the higher taxes, and we don't know this for sure, this is an assumption, but it seems reasonable to assume that they're operating under the premise that better days are behind, that it's not worth taking a risk that could lead to tens of billions in new investment. That seems to be the only justification for their policy.
And I couldn't disagree more. That's why I'm sitting here smiling, because I'm one of those who thinks Alaska's best days are ahead. And it's up to us, though, to do something about it, because the resources are there.
Yeah.
We know that millions of barrels of oil are locked underground at Prudhoe Bay and Capart. We know that they're not being accessed right now.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we go unlock those for Alaskans?
Yes.
And so here was my notion of cutting taxes to spark investment. Can we live on $8.5 billion a year of oil revenues instead of $10 billion?
Yeah.
$8.5 billion? Can we? I think we can. You know.
I think we can script by. I have to eat out less. It's really silly when you look at the big picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially when you figure that $1.5 billion of less taxes could lead to tens of billions in new revenue.
Well, look, I even sweetened the pot from there. All right. In the end, when the Senate passed the new fields tax change and ignored existing fields and all the oil there. When they passed that, I adopted the methodology that they used for new fields and said, you know what, I'll accept that and say, if it works for new fields, it also works for existing fields.
Yeah.
And when I put that forward in the special session, you know, you could have heard the crickets because nobody wanted to accept the 10-10 split again, wouldn't accept the notion that that could help existing fields as well.
Well, back to the vision question, because I think vision really, in many ways, dictates how you live your life, who you believe you are, and I think it's true for a state. You know, the fact that we have so many resources here, whether it's mining, timber, oil and gas, offshore, tourism, I mean, it's phenomenal what has been deposited in the land in which we live. And I agree with you, we have to be good stewards, but if we begin to act like that, if we begin to realize that Alaska has a destiny, this place is special for a purpose, for a reason. These minerals and oil and gas, they were deposited there for a purpose, and we have to start to act like that and realize that better days are ahead, as you said, and I know that's your vision. I know that's a lot of the folks who live here in this state. It's their vision.
We wouldn't be here if we didn't.
Well, absolutely.
We didn't think there's opportunity here.
But here's the disconnect. We've seen polls. Most people believe we should change ACEs. Most people believe in the future that's going to be brighter and better. But yet we have a small group of people in the Senate who've kind of bottlenecked everything and have really kind of tied everything up. How do we get to this place?
Again, it's that divide in the Senate. And if you look at the majority coalition that was formed there, they had this internal rule that in order for a piece of legislation to go to the floor, it took 11 votes in the majority. That means it took 10 Democrats and 1 Republican to decide if something was going to go forward to the floor, because the 10 Democrats held together over the 6 Republicans in the majority. It's math, you know, and...
So I know you're not...
Internal rule.
One of the things I really admire about you, you're not an overly political guy. You don't get your hands dirty in petty politics. I admire that about you.
I mean, I get what's at work.
Yeah, I know you do, but you don't get mired in the pettiness of politics. But would you acknowledge that we've got to make a change in that Senate? There's got to be some change there, either with personnel or some policy shifts there.
Well, I clearly think a new direction is needed.
Yeah.
There's no question in my mind. And you know, I'm not going to go down the campaign road here, but I can tell you that in order for Alaska to realize that destiny that you're talking about, where we actually can grasp our future and maximize Alaska's resources for the benefit of Alaskans, to do that will require a change.
Yes.
And I don't think Alaskans are people that think small.
Right.
I want to think big. I think 1 million barrels a day is achievable. And I think what that means for Alaskans is significant opportunity. Now going back a little bit though, I also think we've got some great news in other areas. You know, if Shell is allowed to continue to move forward in the Outer Continental Shelf, Point Thompson resolution of that litigation by our administration and the companies, that is huge. That means that billions of dollars of more investment will get spent in that North Slope field.
Let me interrupt you for a second, because I want to get into that agreement that you and Commissioner Sullivan negotiated with the producers. That is a major deal, and it's not got much play in the media as far as I can tell. I want to ask you about that. We're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
We're talking to Governor Sean Parnell, and we'll get the update on the effort to move our gas to market right after this. It's 7:50. It's a Dan Fagan Show. .53 is the time. The Dan Fagan Show on Fox 4 KTBY, broadcasting to you statewide, also on channel 654 in high definition. We have Governor Parnell in the studio with us this morning. This was a big deal. We had Commissioner Sullivan on, I don't know, maybe a month ago talking about it. First of all, just the fact that you were able to get the CEOs of all 3 major oil companies in the state at the same time is a phenomenal accomplishment. But
that was the first time in Alaska history that we know of.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
And then you really came up with some substantial agreements here to move our gas to market. Tell us about it.
Well, the reason for the meeting was to get their agreement on moving forward with Point Thompson resolution, as well as establishing that these companies could align around a gas line in the state of Alaska to Tidewater, so an LNG project in our state. And in my State of the State, I set some benchmarks on getting that done. So I said, I want a Point Thompson litigation resolved by the end of March. That's something that 3 administrations, including our own, had tried to accomplish. That was accomplished by March 31. That litigation that had lingered for about 6 or 7 years was resolved, and it was resolved in Alaska's interest. It means that these companies will now spend billions of dollars building facilities and starting to produce liquids from Point Thompson when those leases have been held for 40 years. And if they don't, there are penalties there that will take acreage back for the state.
No more
without
excuses.
question. No more excuses, no more litigation.
Yeah.
Acreage comes back. So my sense, though, is that they really want to produce there, and they've got the motivation to do it now. Shortly after resolving litigation, those 3 producers, along with TransCanada, aligned their interests, and they signed a memorandum of understanding among themselves to move forward on an all-Alaska gas line, a private sector gas line to Tidewater in our state. And that's the first time that I know of that 3 producers have been aligned with a pipeline company to build a pipe.
It's a huge deal.
So
It's a huge deal. Now, we don't know whether it'll be through Valdez or
Right.
the peninsula.
Or Nikiski.
Yeah. We don't know the size of the line yet either.
Right.
How will AGEA play in all this? Will it still be in operation as far as facilitating this?
Yeah, here's the issue with AGEA and the Alaska Gas. That's the Alaska Gas Line Inducement Act. That act gave the state certain benefits, like they had to agree to put in offtakes for communities along the way.
The producers.
The producers.
Yeah.
It said that if you're going to build this line under this AGEA framework, that you're going to assure that future explorers have access to the pipeline on reasonable terms, meaning that if they go explore for gas, they can get their gas in the pipeline too on reasonable terms. It assures that. So AGEA has certain benefits that I want to hold on to for the state of Alaska. So AGEA does play into this. I don't want to be negotiating with the legislature and producers over a new fiscal regime for a gas pipeline starting from scratch when we have these benefits already in law.
Are there any disadvantages to AGEA in this process?
You know, not so far. You know,
Okay.
would it need to be changed potentially to accommodate, you know, the new timelines for a project through Alaska? But we've already signed a project plan amendment with TransCanada that allows them to move forward on this LNG project. Had to slip a timeline because the FERC was going to require an additional filing this fall on a Canadian route. We said, no, we want you to sharpen your pencils on the all-Alaska route, you know, to Valdez or Nikiski. And that's what they're going to do. And that's what the next benchmark is to tell us as Alaskans next September, will you 3 agree with TransCanada that you can select this project in-state?
A project that Elizabeth and I are very bullish on is the Kinnick Bridge. We see it as not just a transportation deal, but opening up new land for younger families to realize the dream of home ownership, because it'll bring affordable housing. Why don't we just take the money that we have in state coffers and just build it?
Because it's in competition with other things like gas pipeline, for instance. You know, and those kinds of big projects have to pencil out. In other words, they have to make sense in the long term, but also in the near term. And at this moment, there's not the legislative support to go spend billions of dollars on a bridge. That being said, there is interest in working the financing to see how it can work. You know, with tolls
Private
and the like.
partnership.
Yeah. But again, I think what was borne out this legislative session is that needs more work.
You support the concept of a bridge?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, otherwise we wouldn't be continuing that work. But it's got to make financial sense. And not, you know, it doesn't have to turn a profit. That's not what I'm saying. But I don't want the state on the hook for somebody else's bad decisions, you know, and it deserves to be fully vetted in the legislative process.
But you believe it would be beneficial to South Central?
I do, yeah, for the same reasons you've just cited, opening up new land.
You are really, you've really taken some courageous positions Because I know the Daily News beats you up a lot. That doesn't bother you. That doesn't.
No,
Especially the Alaska ear. I don't even know if you read it, but they're just vicious towards you, totally unjustifiable. And it seems as though that they're mad at you because you have faith. Mm-hmm. That they hold that against you. They resent you for that.
Well, I think that's my First Amendment right to exercise my faith. I clearly understand the difference between the First Amendment provision about not establishing a religion, but I also clearly believe, like others in our state, that I can freely exercise my faith as an individual. And so that's, again, I've never had a discussion with Sheila Toomey that I can remember, so I have no idea why she holds that against me, as she clearly does.
She
from
does.
The nickname she ascribes to me.
But Governor God. And so, it's a pejorative,
Yeah, but it's, in these jobs in public office, we open ourselves up to criticism, both constructive and destructive. And I'll listen to the constructive because I think I can learn from constructive criticism. The destructive side of it, I try to not even read or take part in. So.
It doesn't bother you. Then you don't let it get to you.
How do you manage to stay courageous through that process?
I know who I am, and I know why I'm here. I mean, I'm here to serve Alaskans. If my heart stays there, as opposed to feeling bad about what people are saying about me, if I know that my motivations are right in trying to help Alaskans, then that's all I can do,
Well, Governor, we really appreciate you taking time to come in and visit with us this morning.
Well, thank you. Yeah, good to be here with you.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for being here.
Governor Sean Parnell. 8 o'clock is the time. It's the day.